I think there's a balance of like romance and darkness that I try to incorporate into my work. And that's probably just through experiences, you know, going back to those years of watching the horror films with Lee. For me, it wasn't really horror. For me, it was fantasy and escapism. And art from a young age has been another world where I've got control and where I can create stories that I choose to create and invite people in to experience it too, you know. I was introduced to art through film really from a young age. That was due to my uncle Alexander McQueen coming over with the latest horror films, and that really inspired a love of storytelling primarily within myself, and that's something that I've kind of taken forward. So really it started from that young age where I was probably about 5 years old. Lee would come over with the films and then he would draw inspiration for his fashion shows from those films, and I would start drawing my own characters with pencil. And just, it was really, really sort of fueled my imagination of how I could take stories and then make something of my own out of them, you know, and sort of push my imagination in a certain way, you know. I landed my first job in publishing and I started there as a junior. I was on a very low wage. I was on, I think back then it was about £8,000 a year, which was quite low. And I was doing probably 5 different jobs while I was there. And then that company went into liquidation. I worked there for 5 years. So I was out of work at the time, and I was working in like a rubbish disposal unit. And then I got a call from Lee that a position had come open at the menswear department for a textile designer, Alexander McQueen. And because we had that shared history, and Lee knew I was very artistic, but I also had a great knowledge of the digital side of things as well. And because Alexander McQueen were very sort of digital focused on their print techniques with the textiles, it was quite easy for me to adapt my skill sets with the digital side of things. And then that's kind of progressed through life into something, I guess, a little bit more sort of elevated in the way that I create my artwork now. And even though it's digital software that I use, there's still an element of traditional values within my work, which keeps the romance and the timelessness of the artwork alive. You know, that for me, that's very important. I feel like there's a lot of digital artists that have embraced new technology, but the one thing that I feel has been lacking within a lot of work is that people see it as like this futuristic technology, and they incorporate futuristic ideas with that technology, you know, and I feel that you need that juxtaposition. It's just a tool, do you know what I mean? That shouldn't really dictate the visual narrative. You know, I approach it as a traditional sculptor would. Do you know what I mean? You can create anything in this space, but you know, you've got to have like a strong narrative and like a reason for what you're creating. You know, like you've got to have so many things that come together to make it a piece of art. And for me, like the storytelling part of it's always been one of the most important things, you know, having a real strong basis of what I'm creating and why I'm creating it, and sort of almost knowing how I want the final piece to look. You know. For me, that aspect of it is really important, is to maintain control over what you're creating and just treat the software as a tool to do that. It's a medium at the end of the day. You know, there's always been tools that sculptors and artists have used. Like throughout the ages, they were using like projection techniques to get like the proportions in place to start with. And for myself, working with real life models and using 3D scanning technology is no different, you know. Yeah, Lee, do you have a look? So, this is the general concept. This one I did of Tasha recently, 3D model. Mm-hmm. So what we're going to do is capture you in some kind of Venus pose. Okay. I've got one in mind, I've got a couple of poses in mind. And then we're going to set you into this environment afterwards. That will become
I love it.
the artwork. This fixed environment then, as a sculpture, that'll give us depth for the 3D lenticular afterwards result. Let's just do a test first of all anyway, just to try and get the pose pinned down. Yes, a bit more, not too much, just, yeah, a bit more like that sort of thing, yeah. And imagine your hair's not there then, do you know what I mean? That's what you'd kind of be doing with your hands, as long as they're not touching, sort of like that, yeah. Like that works, yeah. Yeah, all right, let's get a shot of that. Try and get it locked in, and then we've got a reference point. Yeah, so what I'm doing here is using this 3D scanner by RevoPoint to capture the pose by Lily. And what it does is it captures all the 3D data, and then I'll take that data and then I'll put it into my 3D software and clean up the results and create the sculpture from that data. And for me, you know, this stuff can be sculpted from scratch, but I feel it goes back to that sort of traditional value again aspect of things, of when, you know, you're working with real people in a tangible way, and you're also capturing that essence of life within that, and emotion that you get from a life model is something that you can't really get sculpting that stuff from scratch, you know. It's always about implementing the right things in the right places, you know, and that's across the board of all the skills that I possess, is incorporating the right skill sets in the right way to produce ultimately a unique and timeless piece of art. I don't like to create anything that's really been done before. You know, if you take the idea of the Vanitas skull, that's taken from traditional concept of the Vanitas style of paintings, which usually consisted of like elements of life and death within one image. The way that I created that skull is almost like taking the whole concept of what the Vanitas was about and then building that into one hero image, you know, so you got elements of life and death, but all built within this kind of framework of a skull, you know, so. This is the actual sculpture that I created. As you can see, it's a fully 3D model. And then what we did initially was we 3D printed every element of this. So we'd take a flower. Each petal of a flower was 3D printed and then assembled as a flower again. So it was a really sort of real involved kind of project. And then that was all assembled again into a sculpture which was about 3.5 foot high, made out of resin and then gold leafed on top. So I chose these kind of birds of prey, I guess, because Lee had a love of like kestrels. Flowers, moths and birds was something that were always very prevalent in Lee's shows. And I think it goes back to that kind of dark romantic notion, you know, associated with life and death, you know, the life cycle of flowers and moths essentially, I guess. They don't really live that long and they're always kind of drawn to the flame. And I think it was the freedom and liberation of birds that re-appealed to Lee as well, you know, the escapism within that aspect of being that free, you know. So this piece was created with Lee's spirit in mind, you know. I think the gilded aspect of what I do has almost been like an evolution throughout my work, and it's almost become a signature as well within my work. And I think the thing that's really drawn me to having this kind of golden element is that I feel it's something that resonates with humans, you know. I think it's like the purity aspect of gold. There's some kind of spiritual element when it comes to the nature of gold that sort of resonates with humans on like that spiritual level. For me, it's almost like me putting like my Midas touch as well on the artwork. So it's almost become like a signature that I've put as a final touch to the artwork that I'm creating. For me, it feels like there's a certain quality associated with the silkscreen printing on paper. You know, I feel that there's a certain romantic quality and tactile quality associated with those different techniques that we've incorporated within the print process of this collection that really sort of ties it back to its traditional value and roots, you know. I feel like the gold foiling and the embossing really just adds another dimension to the artworks and really makes it feel like an authentic kind of piece, you know. But the main thing for me is that I've created something that I feel's new and unique enough to almost transport the viewer into a world that they haven't seen before. You know, that's what I'm hoping my artwork will do. I've wanted to combine digital experiences and my artwork for a long time because I feel like it warrants it, especially with my background with digital software and the way that I love to create stories and worlds for people to step into. I feel this is a really great format and way of doing that. I've always been obsessed with detail and finding the small things in imagery, the little hidden gems, you know, and there's always something to find within my work. But I always feel that the artworks were always made to be seen at a large scale, and that's where the W1 Curates screens really shine with this work on them, you know. It's just, they just go hand in hand and work. It's almost like they're made for it, do you know what I mean?